Today, I'm painting something a little bit different, a miniature that I got from DM Stash from onlygames.co, the sponsor of today's episode. My name is Angela, and you're watching Hobby Night. When onlygames.co reached out to me and asked if I wanted to sample one of their Only Games crates, I jumped at the opportunity as I thought this might be a great way to break up some of the larger projects I knew I was going to be working on this year. Let me tell you a little bit about these crates because I think they're pretty cool. In it, you either will receive 3 fantasy-themed miniatures or 3 sci-fi themed miniatures, unless you're feeling ambitious and you want to subscribe to both. Each time you receive these crates each month, it'll be from a different artist, which I think gives us as creatives an opportunity to play around with a bunch of different styles and try different things because we'll be getting so many different styles from these crates. If you want to give these a try or just check out what onlygames.co has on their website as available for purchase, then I'd encourage you to use my code HOBBYNIGHT20 to save 20% off on your next purchase. Huge thank you to onlygames.co for sending me this crate. Now let's go ahead and talk about the lion that I'm going to be painting up today. This guy actually reminds me a lot of some of my favorite Disney movies, both Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. Now I am going to lean a little bit more into The Lion King as my theme here. Specifically, I was inspired by what I was seeing from the Broadway play, especially their color palettes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get some paint on this lion. As with all miniatures, first we need to get the model primed up, and for this I'm going to go with Wraithbone. Now this went pretty well, but I did find there were a few areas that were a bit recessed that ended up needing a little bit of hand priming, which I took care of quickly, and now we can actually work on our pre-shade, a method that I absolutely love to use to prep my models. The first step, because I know that I'm going to be using a relatively warm color palette, is to get some shadows going with a dark brown wash. For this, I use Reikland Flesh Shade, which has a little bit of a red undertone, and I think it's gonna work perfectly for my overall color palette. From there, once the shade is dried and I go back in with a little bit of spot washing to really emphasize some of the areas, we're going to come back in with some dry brushes to work on some highlights. For this, I'm gonna start with a light tan color tone that I have from the Too Thin Coats line. I absolutely love this color, and we're going to build this up gradually, slowly adding a little bit of white paint into the mix until we are happy with the highlights, and I feel like my contrast paints are going to work beautifully over it. I just have to say, I love this stage of the pre-shade process when everything is done and the model is just looking stunning and you can really see all of the absolutely beautiful details that the artist crafted and put into the piece. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump into the video to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, especially if you're enjoying the content that you find here. And if you're into the spicier side of the hobby, well, my Only Fanatics VIP page is currently 50% off through the end of the month for new subscribers. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, use the link in the video description below, and I hope to see you there. Now let's go ahead and get back to the video. As much as I do love how the model looks pre-shaded, we do have a lot of other colors to put on him, and we're gonna start with his flesh. I'm going to follow the classic lion scheme and go with a light yellowish brown and using Agros Dune to do this. Once I'm satisfied with how my base color is looking, I want to emphasize some of those highlights. And to do that, we're going to be using the same Agros Dune color that I started with and mixing in a little bit of the tan that I used in my pre-shade. I didn't want to go with a full white because I thought that might end up being a little too harsh. And I thought the tan balanced with sort of the yellow-brown color tones that already existed in the paint. This works beautifully, and while there is a little bit of back and forth going in to make sure things look smooth and clean, I really, really like the effect of how my flesh turns out when I'm done. Here is where the influence from the Lion King's Broadway show is coming in. When I looked up pictures of what the cast was wearing in this show, they had a lot of very bright yellows and reds. And while I'm not gonna go quite as cartoony as what you might see in the Broadway play, I am still going to use those 2 color tones. So let's start with the red. This is gonna go on the majority of the fabric pieces that we see on the model, specifically his skirt and a couple of other larger details. After I'm done with this coloring, I'm going to go in with a highlight color tone using the exact same red mixed with that same tan tone for my pre-shade, again to bring out some more subtle and soft highlights. I absolutely love the look of this and I'm very happy with how things are going. But we have a couple more colors to play with, specifically a bright yellow. This is gonna go on all the remaining cloth pieces that don't look like they should be leather. And I kind of add in some color tones as I want to and play with this color in various other places where I didn't already use some red just because I felt like I wanted to emphasize it a little bit more, but I sort of did that as I was going along. Once I'm happy with where all the yellow is and I'm feeling satisfied that it's feeling balanced and evenly placed, I'm gonna come back in with a Reikland Flesh Shade wash, the same wash that we use to pre-shade our model. This will help reduce some of those colors down, although I will admit it reduced some of my yellows a little bit more than I wanted to. So in order to fix that, we're gonna come back in with one final highlight color tone using a mix of the yellow and that same tan, and we're going to apply that to everything to make sure we have a beautiful, bold yellow highlight on some of the more obvious fabric pieces. I am feeling incredibly satisfied with how his clothes have turned out, but he does have a lot of straps and bags that I want to paint up in a nice leather tone. And for this, I'm going to go with snakebite leather. Just as its namesake, it makes a really nice, rich, warm leather color tone that I absolutely love to work with. This is going to go on any of the straps, any of the bags, and basically any of the cloth things that I haven't painted already that need to be painted. After that, we're gonna come back into the scabbard that's holding the small dagger that he's got on his waist. For this, I did think about doing the classic red and yellow that I'd already used on the rest of his clothes, but I thought that would end up blending into too much, especially since the dagger is right up against the red skirt. So instead, I decided to go with Griffhound Orange, a really lovely, just beautiful pumpkin spice orange color tone that I absolutely love to work with that still balances with the warm colors I've been using. Then after that, the straps that are around the scabbard, we're going to go ahead and paint up in the same yellow that we'd used previously. And then finally, for the pole of his axe, we're gonna go in with a dark brown color tone, just add a little bit of variety and really make it stand out without calling too much attention to it. Fabrics done. Leather's complete. Now it's on to all the metal bits of his armor and his weapon. And for this, I'm going to go with a lot of golds. But before we get to those metal color tones, I first want to base coat everything that's going to be metallic with a nice black color tone. And while I have this color out, I'm also going to dot his nose and paint up all of his nails to make them stand out. I didn't do this on my polar bear, or at least not the nose, and I think it made her look a little bit odd. And so I'm gonna make sure that I do it on the lion this time. Okay, with the black taken care of, let's actually get to the gold color tones. I'm going to be using two different golds, one light gold and one dark gold. The light gold, I'm going to focus predominantly on his armor, although I will be doing a few accents on his weapon as well using this color. And vice versa, the other gold I'm going to be using, which is a dark gold, is going to be focused predominantly on his weapons and then used sparingly on his armor, with the exception of that one very large shoulder pad that he has, which has a bunch of really fine detail. And I will be honest, I was worried that when I put the gold on this, it might cover up all those beautiful little etched details in the print. However, in our next step, where I apply Nuln Oil to both the light and the dark gold, those details come right back out, and I am so pleased with how this is looking. He is coming together super well, and there's not much left for us to do. So let's wrap things up with just a few more details and the base, and then we can look at the final model. For his hair, this is where I'm sort of deviating from the more realistic lion look. Because you see, I really liked the way my pre-shade looks on his hair. So I don't really want to lose that too much. So we're just gonna put a light sepia wash over top everything and give him a little bit of an older lion look, a little bit of gray hair in there. I really like the way this looks. And now we can actually move on to the base. This is a nice sculpted base that I received with the model. And so we're going to treat it pretty much simply and try to do this as quickly as possible. The first thing that we need to do is put a layer of skeleton horde on the base because I want this to end up looking like granite that you might find in Africa, and that tends to have a lot of browns, reds, and greens in it. Now that the brown color tone is dried, we're going to come back in and spot wash on some dark reds as well as some medium tone greens and blend that together until I'm satisfied and think that it's matching the reference that I'm using. Finally, the last step is to apply a little bit of Agros Dune to the lowermost part of the base where we can put a little bit of texture paint, let that dry, wash it in a brown wash, and then dry brush it using a light yellow color tone. And then finally, we can take a look at the final model and see how our Lion Man turned out. Roar! Here is my Lion Man, and I'm actually extremely happy with how this model turned out. Not only did I push myself on the details, really focusing on bringing out highlights and details, but I just think that like the model itself is really cool. I'm gonna be checking out more of DM Stash's models on onlygames.co because I just think they're really awesome, and I already have been peeking at some of them, and he's got a lot of really cool designs that I think might work perfectly for my upcoming RPG sessions. If you guys are interested in these crates and want to receive some miniatures to paint each month that gives you a little bit of variety and something new to work on, then I'd highly encourage you to use my code HOBBYNIGHT20 and subscribe to the Only Games crate. You'll save 20% off on your first purchase with my code HOBBYNIGHT20, and thank you once again to onlygames.co for sponsoring today's episode. Before I head out, I do want to give a final thank you not only to my patrons, but also my YouTube members for also helping make content like this continue to happen. Without your guys' support, we just would not be doing this, so thank you very, very much. I have been Angela, and I hope you have a wonderful hobby night.